Good morning, good morning, good morning again, folks. Welcome to another episode of Spilling Tea. I'm your host, Tiffany Daniels, and yes, we're going back to that horrible world known as the JRC. But before we do the usual disclaimers, I'm sorry the place is a wee bit of a mess. I gotta clean it up for the week, but I wanted to get these out of the way, so I apologize for the fresh step that you're seeing behind me, but yeah, got to take care of the litter boxes after this. All right, folks, to the disclaimers. In the description box, if you are unfamiliar with the Stop the Shocks campaign or the campaign against the troubled teen industry, you're going to find in there all the pertinent links to get you all caught up on both fights and both campaigns. In particular, I want you to note the article written by NeuroClastic, who is a small non for profit started by autistics for autistics. In that particular article, they have interviewed over 900 ABA professionals in regards to the JRC's so called behavior modification program from all over the world. The Judge Rotenberg, in regards to the Judge Rotenberg so-called behavior modification program, the Judge Rotenberg Educational Center does not want you to read that article to the point that they have threatened NeuroClastic with a defamation lawsuit. They did not remove it from the web page, their website. Bleh, it's morning. So, read that article, share it on all your social media. If a multi-million-dollar torture center doesn't want you to read a particular article on a web page that gets most of its traffic from people like me, you probably want to read what they don't want you to know. You're going to find NeuroClastic's public statement in there in regards to the defamation lawsuit, and we also can't, well, the threat. And we also have a link to the GoFundMe. We are crowdfunding in case the JRC sees through with their threat. Trigger warning, folks, when we discuss places like the Judge Rotenberg Educational Center and the Agape boarding school for boys that ranch out there in Stockton, Missouri, you're going to hear vivid descriptions of and catch clips or surveillance footage of people with disabilities and mental health issues being tortured and abused. If you got young children present, please go ahead, use the headphones. This channel is marked not for kids for a reason. We do use profanity on occasion and we do speak on dark subjects. So if your child is 16 and younger and they're watching this, very obviously parental supervision is advised, all right? As far as why I moved, so that you can see my mess behind me. That's because the battery was running low, folks, and I just want to get this done for today. So apologies for the mess behind me and my not so great looks right now, right? Okay, so where we left off in last video. The data in this study paints a picture of central limit theorem as if it's out of a probability textbook, meaning the results suggest a completely random distribution of ABA's effectiveness. It's what we'd expect to see when changes are caused by many unrelated events. ABA as a discipline seems to neglect that all children develop and learn naturally, and autistic children are no different. So, what they're telling you, to put this in layman's terms, is that when a child is in ABA treatment, if they have any success at all, it gets automatically attributed to the ABA therapy. Well, I'm sorry, but that's false data. Because, speaking as someone who's never set a single foot inside an ABA program, I can tell you there are areas that I developed in and did well in, even as a kid who was even more antisocial back then than I am now, and that's saying something because I'm jaded at this point. I still excelled in those areas. that they mark in their little ABA clipboards as areas that were developed through ABA. There's a lie in that. And it's all based on an unsaid lie that the multitudes of neurotypicals believe. And the lie is this: that autistics in particular cannot develop in any way, shape, or form past base level without some form of intervention making it possible. It's a lie, because just like our neurotypical peers and all children of various ages, we too, especially those of us who never got ABA, we were diagnosed late or we were misdiagnosed and fed pills as kids. That was me, in case you're wondering. We still developed. I still developed life skills. I still excelled in certain subjects. I was reading on a college level when I was in second grade. I was in advanced writing classes starting as soon as I set a single foot inside high school. Okay? Although I did not develop at quite the same speed as my neurotypical peers in some areas, in particular, it took me some time before I had basic normal teenager level hygiene. I don't like to admit that. It's rather embarrassing, but in the for argument's sake, I'll put it in there. Even though we do not develop at the speed of our neurotypical peers in some areas, that does not mean we're not developing at all. Okay? We simply develop at a different rate. Okay? I still developed in those areas. I still learned life skills. I was still ready by literally graduation day to go out and live on my own successfully, and have done so, bar that year and a half after what happened with my freaking psychotic ex, literally since the day after graduation day. Okay? You can't necessarily say when you see a child develop in leaps and bounds in a certain area, which, by the way, us autistics are prone to. It's called hyperfocus. You can't necessarily attribute it as a success due to ABA. It's what we call logical fallacy, or seeing what we want to see. Okay? What's getting explained here, as you can see, is how that data that the medical model totes as the golden standard is severely skewed. Because unless you can show me unequivocally that it was due to ABA 100%, unless you can prove that to me beyond the shadow of a doubt, that it was because of ABA that this that development milestone was reached. You see where I'm going here, right? Just saying. I call it a blind eye. They're attributing it to ABA without taking a moment to think of whether or not that area could have been developed and that milestone reached without it. Okay? Yeah. Let's finish the paragraph here. Autistic children are no different. If autistic kids cannot effectively communicate or demonstrate their knowledge and intelligence, then the ABA gathered is inherently flawed. Exactly. There's two things. This is especially true with nonverbals. In a situation where usually we are unable to communicate, and we're in ABA, and for the first goddamn time, baby, as a smidgen part of that program, we are given a communication device, or we're encouraged to write. They could say that's the success of ABA, when in actuality, it is the success of the reasonable accommodation or the assistive device. See where I don't know that I want to call it 100% dishonesty. I would say that these individuals are not very often taught to think outside of the box. As much as they like to say us autistics can't, some of you neurotypicals, especially in ABA, need to go take yourself into the bathroom and stare at yourself in the mirror a little bit. Okay? They may actually believe that. And the problem is, nobody's really there to challenge that. So when we self advocates come out of where we are and we challenge it, these individuals feel attacked. And they have already been reinforced by the medical model and by neurotypical society as a whole that their view is the correct one, whether it is or not. So they lash out, don't they? Yeah. It's a circle jerk that gets nobody anywhere. No advances are made, and nobody's thinking outside of the box. All right. All right. Let's read this quote here, shall we? Society attacks early when the individual is helpless. It enslaves him almost before he has tasted freedom. That's what it feels like, folks. Even without having to deal with the horrid deal, even without having to deal with ABA. I felt starting pretty damn young with this idea that what I want, what I felt, what I wanted to do, what I wanted to be didn't matter. Okay? Society taught me that. Young, very young. Society taught me very young that in order to be accepted, I had to force myself to be something that I wasn't. Okay? You become enslaved to the goals of everybody else for you. You become enslaved to the dreams, to the ideals that everybody else wants you to hit. You literally become a slave to what other people want you to be. Okay? And this builds resentment, builds a little rage. I can speak personally to that. It almost also breeds disconnect, almost as a form of rebellion, if you will. because you've already just spent the first half of your life catering to everybody else. Okay? Builds resentment, builds anger. It is a kind of anger, resentment, and rage that built in me until I finally came into advocacy and started circling around and making friends out of individuals who are also neurodivergent like myself. Okay? Only then did that anger, that rage begin to start slowly abating. Okay? Because there is resentment there, especially those who were forced to learn how to mask by means of ABA. There is a resentment, particularly when we live in the modern age where everybody is preaching diversity and inclusion. But then it's like we feel that side eye, except for you, neurodivergent fox. We don't accept you as you are. Everybody else is allowed but you. You have to keep playing a role. See what I mean? Yeah. There's still some bitterness there, can you tell? The person who wrote this is interesting because it's also one of the individuals that is quoted by Matthew Israel the most. It was a quote written by B.F. Skinner, who's often considered the godfather of ABA. So while Skinner pioneered many foundational behavioral theories of ABA, he also devoted his life to trying to move the world away from punishment. Among his many discoveries was how punishment didn't result in learning, it only temporarily suppresses behavior. Exactly. Look at this at a wider scale, folks. Take the current conflict as an example. An extreme example, but an example nonetheless. Okay? This idea of I get hit, I act in unbridled revenge, I get hit again. It's a circle jerk. It gets nobody anywhere. Punishment breeds resentment, it breeds rebellion. It's kind of why teenage rebellion is a thing, especially amongst Gen X. Okay? Corporal punishment leads to that special level. And I'm sorry, folks, I'm going to say it. We were a special crazy bunch, okay? We were one of the last generations in which corporal punishment was used. If you look at the crap that we got up to as kids, you could not in any way say that that corporal punishment in any form restrained us from reckless behavior. Because we were the generation of reckless behavior. Okay? You ever watch any of the 90s X Games? Just from my own personal life, I can tell you we had kids jumping off of roofs, kids pushing themselves to jump ditches extremely wide, no helmet, no pads. It actually smiled getting up, having just like got their face full of concrete. All right? We were a extremely reckless generation. That corporal punishment did nothing to curb those behaviors. It may stop it for a time, but after that, the behaviors became even more reckless and potentially life-threatening. All right? So what B.F. Skinner is trying to say here, although he did pin many of the ABA ideas, it's the concept that punishment as a motivator and a teacher doesn't actually work, but they're still using it in ABA. Maybe they're not as extreme as the Judge Rotenberg Educational Center, but it's still being used. And this is why we're still getting nowhere. We're going to close out on that, folks. But before we do, let me make a point that I've made 1,000 times, but I feel like making it again. There is no punishment, no torture, no assault, all of which I've been through at different points in my life and stages, that is ever going to make us more neurotypical. Even those of us who learn and develop extremely well done masks, neurotypicals almost on an instinctual level still know we're not neurotypical. We're still targets. We're still discriminated against in some way, form, or another. We're still ostracized out from our peers. We're still bullied. Okay? There is no amount of punishment, however, whatever form it takes, that is going to make that go away. So why use it? Okay? We're going to close out on that. We don't get very many views on this channel. The few that we do tend to get removed from time to time. So please don't forget to hit the like button, hit subscribe. Don't forget to hit the comments. I do appreciate your time this morning. And as always, folks, we here at Spilling Tea do hope you have a good one. Bye-bye, everyone.